Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Ramos. I am the event manager here at Internet Creations. Welcome to this webinar. KCS is for closers. I'm really excited you all are here. We're going to be talking about embracing and implementing knowledge-centered service in Salesforce. That is a perfect alliteration, which is something I'm a big fan of. So let's get to the next slide. I want to introduce you to Howard Yermis. He is our Director of Product here at Internet Creations, and he is very into knowledge. So welcome, Howard. Thank you so much for leading us this afternoon or this morning, wherever you guys are tuning into.
Or this evening.
Or this evening.
It could be the middle of the night if you really wanted to know. That kind of like brings us to a little bit of housekeeping. So
yes, absolutely. Ask questions, tons of questions. We love your questions. So how to ask questions. On the presumably right-hand side of your GoToMeeting, you'll see a little question box. You can type your questions there, ask them, and we will make sure that we get to just about every question that you have. And you can start doing that now by answering the question, where are you? So where are you calling from or tuning in from this lovely Wednesday afternoon?
Stephanie, I'm in Hamilton, New Jersey. That's a quick answer for that. Our headquarters is here in Hamilton, New Jersey. We're about like right between New York and Philadelphia. We also have an office in Dallas, Texas, but who else is here? Where are they from?
We've got Jeff is tuning in this afternoon from San Jose, California. So it's morning for you over there, Jeff.
Happy morning.
Good morning.
Maybe the overcast has burned off.
We've got North Carolina's here. We have Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Indiana. Yes.
New Hampshire.
More Indiana. Thanks, Steve. NYC. Thank you, Kathy, for coming in.
We love that.
And somebody already asked a question about the session being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded, and we will be sending it out most probably tomorrow afternoon. So make sure you tune in or check your inbox later tomorrow.
Very cool. And also for the recording, you're going to have to PayPal me about $20. That's how you're going to get your
No, that's not how this works,
Oh,
Howard.
sorry. My mistake. Not actually that. So let me take over from here. Go over what we're going to cover in our agenda. As Steph mentioned, my name is Howard Yermish. I'm our Director of Product here at Internet Creations. Not only are we an App Exchange partner and a Silver Consulting partner, but I am a user of knowledge in our own org. So I use our own products, but I use knowledge every single day. I constantly have a list of articles to approve, and our team reuses knowledge. This is something of a personal love of mine. My goal today really is to help you improve agent and customer experience by reusing knowledge and to make sure that you understand the strategies of knowledge-centered service to make you more successful for that. So here's what's on the agenda. First, we're going to define what knowledge-centered service is. If you've never learned about it, you're going to get a nice sort of deep dive, or not so deep dive, a quick look at it. We'll talk about why you would use KCS. For those of us in Salesforce, which is probably everybody here, we want to talk about what's already available for you if you're using Service Cloud. We will talk about some very key metrics with KCS and really how you measure your success with KCS, and then give you a little bit of what you need to do to get started. So without much further ado, Steph, I think I should start. Sound good?
I think you should too. Let's get into it.
I'm going to get into it. All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about, something near and dear to my heart, is what we had to do to kind of get to here. So consider that, when I was a kid, back in the dinosaur era, we had Encyclopedia Britannica. And I actually, in cleaning out my mom's house recently, we discovered that I had stolen two copies, or actually two letters in the case for me. I stole the letter H for Howard because I must have been in elementary school. And then I can't remember what the other one was, but it was like, I think it was like K or something, whatever it was. Could have been for knowledge-centered service. But I had these hanging around, which I had stolen from our little library and never gave back. But, I think about Britannica, and this is something that took over 100 years, and they had employed very specific experts to write each article and to have a specific topic that they were responsible for. And now think about what happened starting in around the year 1998, actually I think it started 2001 is when Wikipedia launched, where Wikipedia built in 18 months something that was much larger and more comprehensive than Encyclopedia Britannica ever was. And so if you think about what Wikipedia is, it's constantly updated. It has a much broader scope of subject matter. There are thousands of points of view as opposed to one particular subject matter expert for an article. And those 1,000 points of view validate the content and they improve the content. So it's always getting improved. And instead of it being this for-profit business entity, Wikipedia it exists through donations of time and some money. People do donate to Encyclopedia Britannica, or excuse me, to Wikipedia. So let's talk about what knowledge-centered service is. Think about KCS, or knowledge-centered service, as it's the method for creating and improving knowledge as part of daily operations. Knowledge gets created as a byproduct of your problem solving, and it's created by the best people to create and improve knowledge, and that's the people who are constantly using it. So we're going to talk about some key principles for this. The first one is a principle of abundance, where you share more and you learn more. And just think about it this way. Knowledge isn't something that requires inventory. It's not tangible. It's not a thing. If I share my knowledge with you, it doesn't decrease my amount of knowledge. In fact, this is actually one of the things that I love. I'm a child of Montessori education, where they use a 3-period lesson. First you see it, then you do it, then you teach it. And when you teach it, that creates mastery. Well, when you share your knowledge, you are effectively teaching it and you're creating a level of mastery. So you're working on that principle of abundance, but also in sharing it, you're creating a mastery of that knowledge. So principle of abundance, think about collaboration. The larger number of knowledge workers that are practicing knowledge-centered service principles, the knowledge base gets deeper and of a higher quality. So you want to make sure that that higher quality of information sort of pervades things. But again, think about a lot of people. Well, this gives us the ability to have diversity. People are great at different things, different backgrounds of experiences, different abilities. All of these things add to the richness of the collaboration. And think about this. The more we share knowledge with our collaborators and with our customers, the more that we as a team learn, the more that our customers learn, and the more we all collectively learn. That's abundance. Second key point is around creating value. So I mentioned earlier that knowledge is a byproduct of experience. I've been doing this tech thing for a very long time. I used to joke with people that when I started in it, leaping stacks of computers was a major feat. Now we can stack 10 laptops up and I can basically step over it like it's nothing. But I really don't know what I have learned in 20 years. Actually, for me, it's more like 35 years, but we'll get into that later. I really don't know all of the things that I know. The only time I realize that I know it is because someone asks me a question and then I magically surface an answer to it. So in the moment, we just, oh my gosh, I learned this thing a long time ago. It just showed up again. That's the moment you have to capture that knowledge. I can't just sit down today and say, I'm going to tell you everything that I've ever learned about technology or computers or Salesforce or service. That's impossible to do. But if you ask me a question, I'll give you a great answer. That means we can't create something with a subject matter expert locked in a room saying, make knowledge. Just not a good thing to do. That said, there's never a really good time to write a very detailed knowledge base article. We don't have that time to sit down and do it. So you have to actually think about, how do I create value from my day-to-day experiences? I get a question from a customer, and instead of saying, ooh, I should write a knowledge article about that, I quickly write the start of a draft. And so by creating some habit that gets practiced over time, those drafts get new things added to them. And those drafts that are getting new things added to them, that's going to make it easier for you to solve the issues that you see over and over again. That really ties in to the third key point. And so let me talk about these three questions. First question is, what is it that we're supposed to capture? Great question. Second question is, what is important or valuable Another great question. And then the third question is, how do we validate what we have? These are three really key questions. And the answer to all three of these questions is exactly the same answer once you understand this third key principle, which is demand driven. Our knowledge is a byproduct of the interactions. So maybe you're thinking, hey, we're going to be proactive, we're going to sit down and we're going to build a great knowledge base for our customers. The problem is we can't really predict the future. We don't know what problems our customers are going to have until they have them. We're really good at sensing a problem and then responding to that problem. So what we should do is, rather than sitting down and saying, we think all of the problems are going to look like this, we actually have to focus on the needs of the people that we're serving, our customers. The ways that our customers are asking us questions, what they're asking about, the frequency of that, that's going to show us the demand of what we should be doing. So if a lot of people are asking one question and no one's asking a second question, you want to spend time on the thing people are asking about. And in that, we're going to see some patterns of reuse. When we're solving problems, specifically solving them, we're going to validate that knowledge that we're creating because there's going to be more customer contexts, more points of view around that same issue. And then when we're evolving our products, those patterns of demand are going to help us identify some very high value improvements. Again, when knowledge gets reused, it gets validated, and the best people to validate the knowledge are the people who are consuming it, your support team and your customers. Now, the last principle is one that comes up a lot in a knowledge environment, and that's about trust. Usually what I hear regarding trust is, I don't want to let my support team just start writing knowledge articles. They might write stuff that doesn't actually work. So consider that trust is a reciprocal thing. If I trust you, you're going to be more likely to trust me. That works with your support team and it works with your customers. So I can talk about trust in terms of the organization, but I want to talk about and focus on KCS process. So if you design your system so that everyone can be trusted, not just the experts, and put the appropriate structures in place in terms of processes and approvals to make sure that we're capturing our experience and then giving the tools that encourage that engagement. And that's going to allow us to reward the behaviors and habits that we want. So now, design systems that are going to cater to the most engaged and capable employees. These systems will encourage trust rather than assume incompetence. So we have to sort of get over the fact that someone might actually add something to an article that isn't useful or might not work. Well, that's okay. Tight control over publishing articles might be bad, but giving people the permission to contribute, that's the part that you want to go for. So for example, you may have a really, really robust internal documentation process where you're going to let tons of people contribute to that article internally, and it lives internally so people can use it and contribute and reuse it. But then once there's a lot of demand for that article where you've seen it apply to maybe to 10 customers or 100 customers or 1,000 customers, depending on the volume of cases that you get, then you can say, you know what, it's reached this threshold. Now we're going to go through a more formal publishing process for that customer-facing piece. Again, no article is the worst thing you can have. An incomplete article is totally fine. The crowd will give you extra pieces for that incomplete article. So you don't want to think that the goal is publish. The goal is to contribute. And that's part of where you want to center your trust on there. So we're going to dive into this whole question around why KCS and talk about some really key business things that so that you can really embrace these principles. But we're going to start with some of my favorite jargon from the KCS world, which is the solve and evolve loops. So I want you to meet the KCS double loop process, and we get a fancy graphic for that. Thank you, Christina, for this fancy graphic. And this graphic is adapted from the library or basically the the Organization for Service Innovation, their practices guide. I'm totally fumbling on the name of the organization. Just go to serviceinnovation.org, and then you'll see the KCS practices guide. Go for that. A lot of the materials in here is adapted from those resources, which you'll get a link to at the end. First thing to think about is this solve loop. So this is really focused on the support engineer. It's a reactive side. So that's this, if I think about it this way, it's this right side of this graphic where you're solving customer problems. So you're trying to decide, okay, when we're solving a problem, what are the things that we're capturing? And when we're capturing it, what are the structures that we have in place so that we can be very consistent about our capture? What is it that we need to reuse? Because again, as we're seeing the same issues, we're going to reuse that, add to those things that we're basically capture new stuff, adding to that structure, and eventually improve that. That's a really simple side that's that very support engineer focused. Where it gets interesting is this evolve side. Now, this is a much more, call it manager or organization focus, maybe product manager, maybe the support team manager. This is where you're going to be looking at the health of your content. So what is it that we can learn from this process? Where did we see the most demand? Where did we see the most reuse of articles? Where did we see the most the articles that were solving issues for customers without them having to open up a support case? Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at our processes and we're going to understand where we can integrate this double loop process into the mix, where we can see things like, oh, well, when an article reaches a particular threshold, we're going to review it for possible product improvement. We're also going to see how well our article's doing. Like, hey, an article might get used thousands of times, but it actually doesn't solve the problem really well. People are using it and trying to find something else. Eventually, all of this needs to focus its way up towards the communication with what your product needs to do. So your leadership needs to understand what's going on, where the big issues are, where your customers are having the most problems, and where your customers are being successful. The results of this process, this double loop process, is the articles that are in your knowledge base and the totality of the knowledge base itself. Now, I always hear this complaint about not having time. We don't have time to capture the answer. Well, yeah, it feels like you don't have those extra few seconds, but actually what you don't really have time is to have your subject matter experts sit in a room and create a knowledge base. They just don't have time to do it because, again, we can't predict the future. So instead, it's the collective answer that we're capturing. Way more complete than a single answer of a subject matter expert. The experts, when they use the knowledge base, even when they know the answer, they're going to contribute to it as well. So again, having the starts of those answers and this constant demand driving attention to the creation and improvement of knowledge, that's what's really going to be saving you time as opposed to trying to sit down and predict the future. Draft articles are not complete articles, and you shouldn't expect it to be. But if you don't consistently capture customer interactions, you're not going to get a really complete article. So I know that there's not a quiz, you don't have to answer a question here, and this is all fine, but the quick quiz is, what do most people on the internet use as a default ticket deflection system? Now, don't think about it as me saying I'm going to serve my customers, but what are your customers using? Well, the answer to this, unfortunately, is Google. And that's a massive risk because your customers are going to find everything that you want them to find, but everything you also don't want them to find, because they're going to find alternative product solutions outside of the walls of your own community or of your documentation or product white papers and things like that. So instead, you want your knowledge base to be something that keeps your customers close by. There's a Forrester study recently that talked about how 75% of customers who relied on community-based user-generated information had a greater satisfaction when using the product. Your customers love it when they are able to solve their own problems. But if they can't find a solution, they're going to give up. Well, what that also means is they're not going to open up cases. Often I see customers who, will say, oh, you've been seeing this issue. And they're like, yeah, it's been a problem for a while. We ask them how long. I had someone who I talked to this morning that's been having this issue for literally 6 months. And they didn't find the article in our community that was exactly the checkbox that they needed. I mean, literally 6 months that they've been having this problem that we fix with one checkbox. This makes me crazy. That said, we do our best to get this there, but we still struggle with this because our customers didn't go to our community, find this article that solved their problem. They just Googled it, couldn't find the answer, and kept suffering. So the great news is because you have Salesforce, the tools are here for you. You already have access to this operational efficiency. You're going to want to make sure that your knowledge base is part of the problem-solving process. So your support team, their regular habit should be searching as early as possible. The problem's probably already been solved. So if they can, in the case process, be searching for the answer, searching those customer questions, they're going to be faster at solving the problems. It's also the thing that as you've been building that with your support team, you're going to enable the potential for a community that actually has a lot of value to your customers. So some added benefits for this is in that successful KCS model, your team, they are part of the solution as opposed to being handed, here's the stuff that you're supposed to use. When they're part of that suggesting and approving and drafting process, they have shared ownership. They feel like they're part of the solution as opposed to just someone who's being asked to solve problems for their customers. You can also, as a manager, reward and motivate that solve loop. So don't just think, I need to just motivate on response time. You want to reward the value of your knowledge workers, and knowledge that's itself is the insight that your team gives. And when you think about the key to future work, it's that insight that separates us from a chat bot that can just answer questions because they can look at a resource, which is your self-service community. Beyond the chat bot is where your people are. So they have to be skilled and they have to understand that they're part of a knowledge building process, not a knowledge regurgitation process. So I want to rant a little bit, and this is my favorite rant. There's actually a note card that I have up on one of our product managers' desks, which is all about sufficient to solve. So I work with really smart people, and we all have a bit of a perfectionist streak. So an issue comes in, and there's this thought, hey, let me write a really amazing article. And I love that. I love that they want to really write something great, but it takes so much time. And so we've got some bad habits on my own team, which is they might skip all of the details about what the customer's seeing and focus on how we solved it. Those are two pieces of the puzzle that you need. They'll look at that first draft and they'll spend hours on it. Well, that's way too much time because we might not ever see that issue again. We might think, oh, I've seen this issue one or two times before. This is going to be a big deal. We should write the article. No. We need to wait for customers to tell us over and over again that this is something they're seeing frequently. I can take that draft article, I can copy and paste the content of that into a case comment, send it off to the customer and solve their problem. They don't need a link in order to solve their issue. What they need is the information. That's not necessarily a web page. It could just be an email from us. The more we use it internally first, that internal reuse, that's what's going to drive a really great article. So sometimes people will say to me, hey, I've got this new article, I want to get this published, and they had it to be published externally, and I look at the article and I write a little note, sufficient to solve, and I publish it internally so we can reuse it. They get upset at me. That's all right. I can take the slings and arrows. That's my job. But until it actually demands that attention, that's going to be a really great article. That article just needs to be sufficient to solve, and if it's internal for a while, that's totally fine. All right, so let's talk about the scaffolding of KCS in Service Cloud. You already have Service Cloud, so you might as well use it. And in fact, let's go over a couple of different things. First is knowledge versus solutions. So there's some technical things here. Just as a note, Salesforce Knowledge is KCS version 5 certified, and it just recently got version 6 certified. If you haven't studied KCS, you won't know what any of that means. Just know that if you want to practice KCS, it is certified. Salesforce is a certified solution for that. So let's talk about knowledge versus solutions. Well, knowledge is a paid offering. It's part of Unlimited. So if you're already in Salesforce Unlimited, then you should be using knowledge. Knowledge gives you a much more sophisticated search algorithm for synonyms and stemming. It's also, if you're using Lightning Knowledge, knowledge is now a first-class object. It is no longer the sort of special snowflake object that classic knowledge has been. That transition might be a little bit of a challenge depending on how much customization you've done, but if you're new with knowledge, you probably haven't done anything with it other than the very, very base level of stuff. So that's its thing. If you need any help with that, ask us. We've done this for our customers. Our own transition is very, very complicated, so we're pretty knowledgeable about knowledge is a fancy way of saying it. We're all sort of chuckling here. Solutions, on the other hand, this is free. Solutions has some problems. There's no article versioning. So you can't really say, oh, well, this version of the article applied to these customers and this newer version applied to different cases. There's no innovation. It's effectively dead. And what you can actually do is if you go over to the Salesforce Lightning roadmap, you'll actually see that next to the word solutions for its product there, it actually says the word never in terms of when it's going to Lightning. And there's not a lot of things on the Salesforce roadmap that say never. Solutions is one of them. If you're building this fresh and you need a free option, okay, but just know that realistically you should be looking at knowledge and you should be building a new solution in Lightning Knowledge. Now, knowledge as a option for you, depending on what you do, you may need something outside of Salesforce to do it. I think everything should be done inside of Salesforce. I like drinking our own champagne here, but there may be some use cases that knowledge itself doesn't fully solve for. So one of those use cases might be a richer platform for your documentation. Maybe you have a learning management system where you have something like Trailhead or the My Trailhead experience, where you've got badges and quizzes or assigned paths for your teams and customers. You also might look at some feature depth. So if you have something with your products where you need specific troubleshooting paths, where you're going from, we need to follow a whole sequence of steps, and if that doesn't work, we need yet another path to go down. That's something that the current knowledge implementation doesn't solve for. I can tell you that might be in your first go with knowledge. That might be opening the mail with a machete. You know, it can be done, but you might lose a finger in the process. The big thing to notice is that Salesforce knowledge is catching up. And now, because knowledge is, the Lightning Knowledge object is a first-class citizen now, the progress that it's making is really, really good. And you're going to see more third-party AppExchange products that extend the use of knowledge that might give you troubleshooting paths on top of knowledge. So stay tuned for that. Now, when implementing Knowledge and Service Cloud, really consider the more technical the audience that you have and how likely are they to consume self-help. So think about who is the audience that you're serving? Is this the customer, and how do they like to consume service? What channels are your customers using to contact us? Are they jumping on the phone? Are they sending email? Are they going through web forms? And we need to make sure that we're leading the customers to these solutions that are available. And your support agents need to adjust their language so that we sort of recognize that, you know, maybe something's already been used. So instead of saying, here's a knowledge article that you should use, say, if you haven't already seen this in our community, here's a knowledge article that we suggest starting with. Have you already seen that? Sort of a way to make sure that people aren't upset in case they've already seen an article and you might not have known that they did that. You also want to look at what kind of information does your customers want to know, and maybe there's things that you don't necessarily want them to know about. So that healthy knowledge base is the baseline for a whole lot of other pieces of the puzzle. So sometimes people have said to me, ooh, we want to do live agent, or we want to do a community, or we want to do chatbots this year. Well, the thing that people want to use communities for, and they want to use live agent for, and they want to use chatbots for, is access to your knowledge base. So if you don't have a healthy knowledge base yet, you're going to find that people are like, great, I have access to a website that helps me in no possible way. Why don't I just fill out a form and tell them to call me? So, you know, just so that you know. Second thing here that I want to go into is making this easy. So I have this thing. I don't know if any of you use Path on your case pages, but in our Lightning implementation, we have Path. And when a case is new, the first step it says is search knowledge. In the second step, where we're working in development, it says search knowledge again. Just search it again. Like the more that you learn, the more you should be searching. The more your customer tells you, search again. Maybe there's a symptom that they're having that was not something they in their initial question. The more that you have inside of that knowledge, it makes it easier to search. So again, it's something in Classic. You can create a new article from the closed case screen. I'll show you that a little bit later. But the key here is that nobody ever goes back and search and creates the article later. So your agents should be like really, really trained to do that sort of minimum piece, that minimum viable product, which really is a minimum viable article, that little bit there. One last thing here is make sure that you have some templates, small but useful collection of document templates. I can tell you, think about like 3 templates, maybe one that's a great a troubleshooting article, a how-to or FAQ, and then like a release notes. Those are the 3 that we use here. Don't think that you need 15 or 500 different templates for this. You want to have a small number that are easy to digest and to work with. So let me show you a little bit around how articles can work. And again, this is something where in classic knowledge, you might have been using article types. It's now a record types thing, which is a more traditional Salesforce object. And we want to look at a few key things to consider, some fields to look at. So let's take a look at these. Number 1 here is article record type. I think about that as that would be the difference in our templates. Like, is it a troubleshooting article? Is it a how-to or an FAQ kind of article? Or is it our release notes? So we want to look at that article record type as a way to do it. We like doing our document. Our documentation is a whole separate custom object that's just for us, but you could have something that's, it's a documentation article if you wanted to do it that way. Number 2 here is your symptoms. And again, think about your symptoms as this is what the customer is reporting, not what you're solving, but the customer is saying, hey, I am seeing X, Y, and Z error message, or this is the problem that I observed, or here's all these different things there. Again, this helps you improve the findability of the article when the support agent is searching. Think about it this way. When you are searching for a solution, you don't know what the solution is. So all you know is what the problem is. So your symptoms are all the pieces that you should be searching for. And if you train your team, the more of those little nuances that they find, that helps that symptom section get more and more complete. That helps you also find this is the right article that might be solved. So this is the part where let your agents contribute to the symptoms like crazy. Status, this is number 3 here. This is kind of a self-explanatory thing, but challenge your team to check the status if it might feel a little bit stale. So I can tell you, we had a long requested feature of Case Merge Premium, where the result of the merge didn't respect the chronology of all of the different pieces of the puzzle. So for example, if you had 2 cases, the chronology of the case, when you did the merge, the child case that got merged over to the parent, all of the emails and comments and files, they all were kind of timed at the time of the merge. Well, there was a platform limitation that was preventing that. So Salesforce introduced a setting and we were able to update the product to account for that setting. And because we had some related cases, we went back to some customers and said, hey, this is a new thing. We can do this now. And so we updated our documentation so that we could make a push for that feature as well. Moving right along here, and this continuing with the anatomy of an article, I want to show you some additional information. Now, this is a great all-purpose catch-all for the stuff that you don't know where it goes. So, for example, like a link to an idea on the idea exchange. This is something that's not going to apply everywhere, but if an article says, hey, there's an idea for Salesforce to resolve this, that's great. Great catch-all. Internal notes, again, number 2 here is a little bit obvious, but your team should be actively updating this field, mostly because you could have your internal notes as not public facing ever. So you don't have to worry about the grammar, you don't have to worry about spelling, you don't have to worry about making sure that everything's right. You might just have like, here are my internal notes, we've got a workaround, we've got a thing, make sure to test for this. Number 3 here, next review on. This is something where if you know what, this feature is going to get resolved in summer 19, then put a date that's when you know summer 19 is going to be available. You might say, you know what, late May, early June is when we're going to see summer 19. So let's check and test this again then. Number 4 here is a chat answer. So if you're going to do something like Live Agent or a chat bot, you might want to have some automation that automatically copies that stuff. Well, if you can have a nicely written chat answer that's easy for your agents to use or your little Einstein chatbot to use, that's a great place to do. Number 5 here is chatter. Now, chatter is something where if you have collaboration and you can mention groups or mention people, this is a great way to get some people to provide some insight on the article creation process. That might be a great place to ask questions to your subject matter experts. Hey, we have this issue, we're working on this article, we saw this, can you comment? Well, you might not want them writing the article, but providing some insight in chatter to help you with that. Number 6 here is the related cases. So I've talked before, you heard me say demand driven. Well, when you relate cases to articles, it ties directly to that principle of demand driven. And you can also always go back to those cases, find some good case comments. Those are the sources for your content. You don't have to rewrite stuff like crazy. Now, if you're still in Classic, there is the closed case screen, and I recommend two pieces here. Number one is the self-help field. This is way critical for reporting on how your knowledge base is improving and getting used. And also number two here, a button that's the save and create article. So when you're closing the case, if you haven't already created the article, you go directly to, you close out the case, you save it, and you go right to the article creation screen. It just makes you have a little bit of extra efficiency here. Article quality index. This is something that Salesforce traditionally didn't do very well, but there were some third-party options. But with Lightning Knowledge, there is actually a new Labs app from Salesforce. It is for AQI for Lightning Knowledge. It's actually a Salesforce Labs application that gives you that article quality index. I'm kind of looking forward to being able to play with that myself. So now let's switch over to measuring success. And there's a few key things here. One of my favorite quotes is from Carl Pearson, which is that which is measured improves, and that which is measured and reported improves exponentially. So let's look at some key points for measuring success. Now, case resolution time. So a lot of times people will look at, hey, I'm already measuring case resolution time. It might be based on how long it is the handling time for a particular support agent. Well, what better way to measure your knowledge and the success with using knowledge is when articles are attached, does my case resolution time go down? So I would want to compare cases that have a resolution time that have articles attached versus articles not attached. Well, community feedback. Did this article resolve the problem? Have you ever seen on communities where it's got a little thumbs up, thumbs down? Did this article help you? Well, you should be using that data, letting your customers tell you this was useful. That'll tell you if they actually didn't open a case. Again, if you're looking at just your cases, you aren't necessarily seeing that community feedback telling you these articles are really helpful. That also leads into case deflection. So if you have mechanisms where, hey, by using the chatbot, I was able to deflect a case. They got the answer that they wanted. We didn't need the human resource. We could actually use the knowledge base to solve for that. So by looking at, the whether or not they use self-service without opening the case, being able to track that. The other side of that is if someone was looking at the knowledge base, but then they did have to open the case. Are your self-service resources really working for those customers? So for example, if you aren't capturing all the symptoms on an article, you might not be finding that a particular knowledge article applies. So people might not find an article that's already there for them. So if they are opening cases, but then you find that there is a knowledge article that works for that open case, maybe they're just not finding the right things and you need to improve the content of your articles to make them more findable. Article attachment reporting. I personally report on this at our monthly support team meetings, and I do it first. I want everyone on my team to know that this is important yesterday, it's important today, and it's important tomorrow. Every single month, I look at the percentage of cases that have articles attached to it. And we motivate that. When it goes down, I have a little moment where they see me get that quiet version of Howard where I'm not yelling at them, I'm just making them feel bad about themselves and their futures. So that's the kind of thing that you want to get there. Now, what's great about article attachment reporting is it's part of your most used articles. So as they're attaching them to cases, you could report on how many times is a particular article attached to a case. Well, imagine if you had an article that was being used like on 10% of your support cases. Well, maybe you should be promoting that content on your blog. So it isn't just an article that says, I can solve this problem this way, but it becomes a more proactive way to do something. Maybe you have a great video attached to that. So those articles that are getting reused and attached and reused from there and improved, that's a great opportunity to create some really rich content for that because they're solving customer problems. So I knew that for those of you that saw me tease this, I told you I was going to rant about two things. Well, the second thing I'm going to rant about is our one issue per case. And this is the two pieces of this is whether you've got duplicate cases where the same issue's got 9 different cases for it or even just 2 cases for it. This is going to mess with your article attachment reporting. If you have 3 cases for the same issue and you don't merge those cases into one case, your article attachment reporting is going to look abnormally low. You're going to have too many cases, but no case deflection, good case deflection metrics. You're going to be messing with your resolution time. You're basically screwing up the concept of demand driven. It won't be accurate because you've got tons of duplicates. Well, that said, if you're going to make sure to get rid of the duplicates, you also have to make sure that your support agents are not solving 2 uniquely separate issues in the same case. What does that mean? If a customer asks me a question and they say, hey, this is my one question, and we give them an answer and an article is attached to that, that's a one-to-one issue. But let's say they ask me about 2 different things. One of those things might be a bug that has to get fixed. Well, I need to split that into a bug fix case because I might want to take bug fix cases and make sure not to include them with my article attachment rate. Why? Because it was a bug. There's no way that we could have attached that article to it unless you're using your release notes to attach those back for the bug fix. So you have to have a really healthy management process in terms of your KCS practices. But by splitting those cases out, you can track it separately and make sure that that issue is getting the right kind of knowledge article attached to it, as opposed to having 3 articles attached to the same case. And if you have 3 articles, you might say things like, this was the article that actually solved the issue, as opposed to having 3 articles attached because you had 3 issues, and then you have 3 articles that were all marked, these were the articles that solved the issue. That's not a really good way to do it. So you got to make sure you're getting a really good 1 issue per case practice. All right, so if you like my rant, don't forget, little shameless promotion. My apologies for sneaking this in here, but we are currently bundling case merge premium and case split, shameless marketing, and you would save 25% on this. So make sure to reach out to one of our account executives to get a demo of that. And we're back. So what do you need to get started? My apologies. Steph is laughing over here for my shameless marketing. 2 thumbs up on the shameless marketing. So what is it that you need to get started? Well, it's really these 4 things. First, it's people. Well, people are your most important asset in your company. Why? Well, from a KCS practice, it's because they have all of these different viewpoints. Their job is to listen, not just write knowledge articles. And in listening, that's how they create those drafts at the time of working with the customer. Those interaction times, they need to be more valuable than just, oh, the customer told me their printer was broken, so I heard it. They have to actually tell me what they're seeing, why it happened, what happened beforehand, what they were doing. The more of that listening and then capturing that into the article, the better. It also helps you recognize your strengths and weaknesses in relation to knowledge-centered service. Your subject matter experts, you're still going to need them. They are very critical, especially when you are evolving those products and that other side, that evolve loop. And again, once you start having that more healthy knowledge base, you want to make sure that you're getting buy-in at all levels, not just your support team who's engaged in the solution, but your executive sponsorship, showing them that KCS is really benefiting new initiatives, that new initiative around self-service with the community or with live agent or a chatbot. Those managers need metrics, so those metrics have to be running at day 1. So that's, your people, and there's super duper value. Well, the second thing is process. This is actually really, really simple. If you can associate articles with cases as part of your process, you can let demand drive attention. That demand-driven process is there. You already have Salesforce, so that should be a really good thing to build into your process. And if you're not paying for knowledge licenses, I encourage you to start paying for knowledge licenses and really dive into this. The third thing here is your technology. You've got it. You want to make sure that Salesforce knowledge is there. And you're working with it. I just mentioned this. I should have flipped the slide a little bit earlier. The last piece here is patience. KCS takes time. This isn't something that you're going to start doing KCS practices and next week you're going to see some result. You might, for some of your most used articles, you might see right away that people are reusing the same articles. That's a great sign early, but realistically, it takes a lot of time. But it is going to help you increase your capacity, and it's going to help you get more proficient with this self-service process, or it's going to get you more proficient with creating articles. That's going to enable some more self-service, and eventually it enables the improvement of your process. and I mentioned this earlier, but I've actually changed some of the language in our canned comments because our customers are starting to find our articles more because we've got deeper articles. This is something that when I started getting really, really adamant about KCS practices, and I've been pretty adamant for about 18 months, I'm seeing the results of that now. I'm seeing it bubble up into our products, and I'm seeing it really, our customers are, seeing these articles and solving things. So often they open up a case, we send them an article, and they go, oh, that solved it. And so we're really encouraging them to look through those knowledge-based resources. So last, if there's any questions, we're going to go to that. But one of the things that I do want to look at, and I don't know, Steph, if you have any questions that we need to jump into. Do you have any specific ones at this point?
Yeah, we can get into some questions. So Jeff wants to know if the AQI Article Quality Index app comes with Lightning by default, or is it something that you have to download from the App Exchange?
It's something you have to download from the App Exchange, but it is free. So free is like as in free beer, as in free pizza. I like free. It's a new Labs app, so I would have that slight grain of salt in terms of how effective it's going to be, but it's definitely something where Salesforce was never particularly good at it. They always relied on some other resources. This Labs app is a good positive step in the right direction.
Great, and we also have another question from Deb who wants to know if case merge and case split are available for Lightning.
Yes, they are both definitely available for Lightning. We have Lightning components specifically for your case page layout. So there's a duplicate detector that shows you how many duplicates that you need to resolve and a button that takes you there. So that's something you can drop on your Lightning page layout. For split, you've got a button that says split the case, and then you have actually drag and drop where you've got the existing case and the new case, and you can drag your comments from the old case to the new case. You can drag emails and files and attachments, whatever you want, as well as updating your subject and case owner and the different conditions there. So you can really get that new case ready to go.
Thank you so much for that. We have another question from Louie who wants to know what is a practical way that people begin to contribute article content that is sufficient to solve?
It's actually where your templates come into mind. So if you have a template that says, what were the symptoms? What was the customer seeing? What were the steps you took to solve? So what they should be contributing is if the customer said, I saw this particular error message and here's a link to a screenshot, they should be adding that to the symptoms. Again, don't worry about the grammar. You just copy and paste that content in there. You're encouraging the contribution, not the refinement of the article. Let the refinement happen because people keep seeing it and they add their stuff. So I think sometimes people think that they should be doing a lot more, but the little contributions add up. That's the whole healthy KCS practice.
Right. And continuing on that question, when you can you offer any best practices for recognition or how to address negative behavior?
Sure. So from a recognition standpoint, I actually love looking at that article attachment rate. So when I look at that report, I can slice it out and I can say, this person on my team is the highest performer, is consistently attaching knowledge to articles, and being able to pair that with that other time to resolution stat. If I see that the people who are my top performers for time to resolution are aligned with my top performers for article attachment rate, I can let them know, look, you are handling more cases because you have a higher capacity because you're using these good behaviors. So that might mean carving out some time for them to learn new skills. So rather than saying, great, you can handle more cases, handle more cases. What you actually do is say, we think that you're going to handle 100 cases a month or 200 cases a day, whatever your average handling is. That's what we want you to go for. So when you get to those numbers, you're actually carving out time for yourself to grow your career. So it's not just an acknowledgement of you're doing great performance, but you've given yourself time to become smarter. That's the part where you can really motivate your team to be more engaged in this process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So everyone who is contributing, do they need a knowledge license?
Yes, they do. So that's the part where Salesforce likes to collect their pound of flesh. But it is something where if you're using the unlimited edition of Salesforce with Service Cloud, you'll have that already. So that won't be all of your knowledge workers will have that.
That's good to know. continue asking your questions in the question box. If you guys have any more, we'll be hanging out here for the next few minutes. We actually just had another question come through. This person doesn't have communities. What are other ways that they can start to use KCS to help our external customers with self-service?
If you're not going to be doing it in a community, I actually love, like, building the knowledge resource internally is super duper valuable just from the internal productivity of the organization. It's then deciding my most popular articles. That's something where you might have, you could do this on a WordPress site where you just say, look, I'm going to have some of our most used solutions. I'm going to curate those as an external resource. That's actually something where you could do that very inexpensive, quick to solve. You could just do it with like your top 10 most used articles internally, turn them into some good content externally, and then your Google metric, like if you have Google Analytics and it's showing you our customers are finding this and using it, you're building yourself a case to have a much more robust knowledge, a knowledge base for that. One of the things I actually want to talk to you all about, let you know, there's a Trailhead module. So if you haven't played with Lightning Knowledge yet, there's a great Trailhead module called Enhanced Service Cloud with Lightning Knowledge. It will walk you through the steps to do that, give you some basics. It's really, I like this little module. It works pretty well. It doesn't take too long. By too long, meaning, you know, they say 3 hours and 45 minutes. If you've done any admin work before, consider this maybe like a 2.5 hour module. They're just always a little generous with their time. There's also a bunch of different resources from the serviceinnovation.org site. The KCS Principles and Core Concepts is a great place to go. There's this article called Intelligent Swarming that's really going to kind of give you some of that business case for why you want to have lots of different viewpoints. Another author, this isn't specifically KCS, but his name is James Surowiecki, and it's a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, and he also has a TED Talk, but it really is about trying to crowdsource information and getting all those viewpoints. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. Steph, do we have any other questions before we wrap this up?
Yeah, we have another question from Don who wants to know about best practices for avoiding duplicate articles. So you have all these people contributing, but we want to make sure that we don't have tons of duplicates here too. We do not like duplicate content.
Yep. So there's two pieces of that answer. The first one is in the habits at the beginning of a case. That's why I talk about search early, search often. That's sort of like the people here know that I'm always like, did you search for an article? Did you find it? We sometimes get duplicates. You have to be very careful that a duplicate may show up because the symptoms are different. So don't consider that a duplicate that the solution is like you need unique solutions. You want unique symptoms. So if it's the kind of thing where one issue sees 3 different symptoms, you might see 3 articles that have 3 separate symptoms, and then eventually you realize, oh, they really are part of the same thing. So that's something where at that point you're going to resolve those duplicates down, and that's actually part of the article quality index piece where people might not have found the article, but an article is something that applied in multiple places. So you're going to resolve those duplicates. It's okay to get those duplicates, but recognize that when you're resolving them, you want to make sure you capture the symptoms from the 3 different duplicate solutions. Otherwise, people won't find it. The whole point is symptoms are the part that you're going to look for. The solutions are the parts you don't know yet.
So look for different symptoms that could be solved by the same solution.
Correct.
Woohoo! Any last questions out there? Just put them in the chat so we can get to them. But we'll definitely be wrapping up soon so you can get to the rest of your day. And before we go, we definitely want to encourage you to attend our next webinar that is happening on Thursday, April 25th, called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up in Salesforce. It is going to be led by one of our Salesforce consultants, Jeremy Krebs. He is so smart, and I'm so excited for you to be a part of this webinar. So make sure you sign up for that when you get the invitation in your inbox, and it will also be available on the internetcreations.com website very soon, probably as soon as this afternoon.
Awesome. So the last part, and you can certainly continue to ask questions, we're going to continue to hang out, is we're going to say thank you. Thank you all for your time this afternoon. This is one of those webinars that we do from time to time, which is very much about, it's less about our applications, it's less about a new feature, or it's less about a service we can do. This is really just, we wanted to share with the community what we're doing for knowledge-centered service. I know what the performance improvements have been for my team. When I talk to other people, I see what they're doing. And frankly, if you are not providing a great resource for your customers, your support agents are going to be suffering through customers that really wanted to solve this themselves and not just with anything. Oh, look, my ESET is updated while we were doing a webinar. Handy. All right, well, thank you very much. And we're going to stick around to answer any more questions, but I appreciate your time and attention.